So this is why straight A students can sometimes fail to get into medical school and how to fix it. So there is this old myth that 80% of your medical school application will come from your grades in MCAT, and only 20% will come from all your other stuff. This is no longer true. This was true maybe, 7 to 10 years ago, but these days medical schools have moved on to what they call a holistic model. So holistic simply means a model that doesn't assign a particular weight to any one category, and instead looks at all parts of your application from a big picture point of view. So yes, that includes your college grades, your MCAT, and all sorts of random checklist extracurriculars. But then it also includes things like major projects you've done, initiatives you're a part of, and pretty much anything that makes your application stronger, in a general sense. So then what's the problem with straight A students? Well, many kind of over-index on their GPA and MCAT. They pour all their energy into stats, and they believe that's sufficient to get them through the med school loops. However, they're actually ignoring a huge amount of application context. So as you can see, GPA and MCAT only make up this tiny section right here. And while it's extremely significant as it's a part of the core part of your application, it still doesn't cover a lot of what's needed to get into medical school. Now, in reality, if students are covering their GPA and MCAT well, they most likely have most of their check marks as well. So just to briefly go over them, check marks are activities that you should have something for, but you don't necessarily need to invest incredibly high amounts of time into them. So that includes some leadership activity, some form of research, some form of shadowing, and then some form of diversity or life experience. This last one's a bit vague, but I have other videos going more in depth onto it. Anyways, the idea is students generally cover GPA and MCAT pretty well, and then manage to find something to fill these check marks in throughout their college career. However, the thing that really ends up getting missed is this area right here, your keystone extracurricular. So what's a keystone extracurricular? This is the one activity you do that shows you have a life outside of college. Medical schools have started over-indexing on this ever since they've switched to a holistic model, because they believe it's a good indicator of your personality and your ability to kind of have passions and interact in a humane and kind way with patients. Whether or not that's true, that's just the reality of admissions that we're dealing with now, so we might as well talk about a good way to cover this. Before I talk about how we're going to achieve a good keystone extracurricular, I'll just give you a couple examples so you know how kind of varied they are and how they can work in helping your application. A keystone extracurricular can really be anything, even if it has the faintest tie to medicine. So I'll give you my keystone first. I had a course I started back in college, which was a study skills course, which, by the way, if your child could benefit from that, that's in the description for free as well. That course was something I spent quite a lot of time working on, and I managed to help quite a few people take their grades from C's and, low B's to high A's. And so I was able to talk about that a lot as my keystone extracurricular, and then my tie to medicine for that was teaching is an important skill in medicine, both, while you're training other physicians in residency or as an attending, and also for explaining conditions to your patients. Now that was mine. And you might be able to see that connection to medicine even without me explaining it like I did. However, that's not a rule. So I had a friend who actually got into the best medical school in Texas and one of the top 10 medical schools in the country, Baylor. And his keystone extracurricular was his private pilot's license. In essence, this guy went and got a pilot's license because he was really invested in aerospace and really enjoyed flying. You might not be able to draw a connection to medicine to that super fast. But the way he did it was he said he was really interested in aerospace medicine, which is an incredibly niche, tiny part of medicine that he may not even go into in the future. And if you're wondering about whether or not this made any impact on his application, the interviewer Baylor sent him had a husband who's an astronaut. I highly doubt that to be a coincidence. So now that we've covered kind of the widespread of what keystone extracurriculars are, let's talk about how we can plan to have a solid one by the time we apply. So the first thing you want to do is start early, right? Because these are things that take time, and you really don't want to last minute it. And the way you start is you want to make a list of things you're genuinely interested in or you're naturally talented at. So, talents and interest. Just to tie this back into the two examples, I was naturally interested in study skills and spent quite a while before even thinking about creating a keystone extracurricular on researching and developing study skills. And obviously, my friend was naturally interested in aerospace. You're going to have some interest you've cultivated over the past 2 decades, and that's one of the first avenues you want to explore. Now, it's possible that this isn't going to work out for you. For example, if your natural interest is video games and nothing else, that's going to be hard to tie into medicine, especially with the stigma against video games. However, you most likely are interested in other stuff that you just haven't explored deeply. So you need to take some time to do some self-searching and properly kind of reflect on what you're good at and what you're able to do. Now, once you have this, you can move on to step 2, which is turning it into something that is either difficult to do or helps a lot of people. Both is ideal, but in reality, you just need one. For example, my keystone extracurricular was not difficult. It was fairly easy for me to create a study skills course and kind of give it away to people and teach them how to study better. My friend's keystone extracurricular was quite difficult, right? Getting a pilot's license while also being a premed isn't easy. Now, you could argue that it's not super helpful to other people, but he still managed to get into one of the best medical schools on the planet with it. And then finally, you want to take whatever you've done and tie it into medicine. And again, this is something that should never be a constraint. If you can tie something like a private pilot's license into medicine and it works out, then you should really understand that the sky is the limit. So that kind of covers the basics of why straight A isn't sufficient to get into medical school. And hopefully you are able to kind of use some of these tips to develop a good keystone extracurricular and bolster your application.